and welcome to Addicted to Murder. This is Courtney, licensed professional counselor with over a decade of experience.
And this is Trisha, and I think you could say that Leonard Lake and Charles Ng definitely had liquorish thoughts.
Liquorish. Makes me think of liquor with like the E-U-R.
No, it's spelt like Lickerish, but it's pronounced liquorish.
Oh,
Like fancy licorice.
interesting.
But what it means is having lecherous or lustful thoughts.
Oh, they definitely had lustful thoughts.
All kinds of bad ones, which we will go over today in our final part 4.
Woo! We made it.
We did. Yeah, but before we get to our part 4, Courtney, do you have a question?
I do have a question. And we may have asked this before, but if we have, I don't remember. So
White coffee. I'm good now.
we'll edit that out later. Probably not.
It's fine.
Anyway, so my question today is, if you could live in any sort of like fantasy universe, so something that is not current planet Earth universe,
Sure.
where would you want to live?
Well, I don't know why this came to mind, but Star Trek Next Generation came to mind. But I
Okay.
don't know that that's really where I'd want to live. I mean, it would be cool to have a holodeck. Always thought that would be sweet.
That would be nice.
Oh my gosh, did you just hear my cat?
I was gonna say, was that a cat?
That's Scully. She's
She's old.
really learned how to talk to humans, and she does a very soulful meow when she needs anything. And then she's so old that she forgets what she needs, so then it sounds even more pathetic. Okay, hi Scully. You're fine. What's in your mouth? Do you see that?
No, I can't see her.
Pause. Okay, we're back. We had to remove the funny feather from my cat's chin, and she's okay now. I've rethought about it, and I'm taking Star Trek off the table. I'm going to go with Rainbow Land from Rainbow Bright.
Oh, okay.
I used to love that when that came out when I was a kid.
Yeah, that was
So,
an 80s thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, I still remember the song from the movie, and I love the little sprites.
That
Yeah,
was a little before my time, so I don't really know much about Rainbow Land, but it sounds nice.
it's nice. It's a nice place to live. I love rainbows.
I mean, who doesn't, really?
They're just amazing, especially like real ones.
I saw a really awesome one.
Last week?
Last week.
I saw it
Yeah.
too. It was pretty crazy because we got some rain, which was needed.
Yes.
So, where would you want to live?
I think I would want to go to Narnia.
That place is scary.
I mean, there's some scary things, but also, like, you can talk to animals, and there's magic there.
Turkish delight.
I mean, I could go to Europe and have Turkish
But
delight.
do you remember that?
I do remember
in
Turkish
the language.
delight.
It's like she kept luring them there with Turkish delight.
Well, really just Edmund.
What is Turkish delight? Have you ever had it?
I think I have, actually. I think when I was in Europe, I tried it. It's kind of like I think, and please, people who actually know the answer to this, correct me. It's kind of like a nougaty fruit jelly kind of thing.
Sounds amazing. I remember as a kid, I just heard Turkish and I thought of turkey, so I thought it was like a dinner, like a pot pie or something. It wasn't until
Interesting.
I was much older that I realized that it was like probably from the country Turkey, I'm assuming, and it was a sweet,
Yeah.
but I don't know what
I
it
want to
is.
meet Mr. Tumnus
Oh, I remember Mr. Tumnus.
and Aslan. And,
Did you ever watch that David Bowie, The Labyrinth?
yes, I did.
That was a really weird movie.
It was a weird movie.
I haven't seen it in a long time.
Neither have I.
I don't know if it would be scarring to watch it now, or like the Never-Ending Story, like
Oh
the
my gosh.
saddest
Saddest story ever.
ever. But like I watched it so many times. I mean, it had a good ending. Thank goodness
Yes.
that Artax came back to life.
Yes.
But I mean, between that and Princess Bride, I was terrified of quicksand.
Oh, yeah. I definitely thought I'd encounter a lot more quicksand in my life.
Exactly. All right. Well, good question. We figured something out.
We did.
I haven't watched. I mean, I read those C.S. Lewis.
C.S. Lewis, yeah.
I read those when I was a kid, but I also watched like the cartoon.
Got it. I
Of
like the live action movies that they made in like the early thousands were actually pretty decent.
Okay. Pan's Labyrinth.
Oh.
Did you see that one? That one was scary.
I think I watched part of it and then I was like, this is why I don't watch scary movies. And then I stopped watching it.
The monster was scary.
I just remember the hand with something on it.
Yeah. It had a hand and it had the eyeball.
Yeah.
And then they mixed it with like the Tool, the music by Tool. Like it pairs up perfectly with, I think it's 46 and 2, that song. So creepy. Anyways, okay, we'll move on.
Yes, we digress.
Sorry, that happens. What's the recap you want to throw our way?
So I'm just going to be real brief with it. So in the past 3 weeks, we have learned about our boys Leonard Lake and Charles Ng with their less than stellar childhoods, their military experiences, obsessive sexual and violent fantasies, illegal weapons collections, and the beginnings of their murder spree.
So we're picking back up during the murder spree, and so far these two do not seem to be doing Operation Miranda victims yet. Perhaps more likely victims of financial and material opportunity. Paul Cosner was 39 when he disappeared. He also appeared to be a victim of opportunity. He had advertised his car for sale in a local paper and went to meet an interested party. He was never heard from again, and his body was not found. His car, however, was found when Leonard Lake was arrested, and there were 2 bullet holes in it. So one of Leonard Lake's journal entries read this, quote, coordinated with 3 and completed op. Pulled off with no hitch. It is routine now. Sweat, dirt, but no regrets. Courtney?
So Leonard is different from most of the serial killers we've talked about in that the killing itself is not really the behavioral urge that he needs to be satisfying. His deviant urge is mostly to imprison and sexually torture women, aka Project Miranda. But murder seems to be just kind of more of a means to an end. He had such little regard for human life that killing a man to take his car held really like no more weight than killing an insect that was annoying him. It was just something in the way. Mm-hmm. Now, Charles, on the other hand, did have fantasies about killing people and seemed to take more pleasure in the act of murder itself.
Well, on November 16th, 25-year-old Cheryl Okoro of San Francisco disappeared from a rooming house. Remains and photographs along with an 11-page handwritten letter would later be found on Lake's property. Charles Ng's co-worker, Clifford Parantu, was the next to go missing. In April of 85, Leonard sold Clifford's motorcycle and several of his belongings, and they would later be found at Ng's apartment. Jeffrey Gerald, who was also working with Ng, vanished after going to help Ng for a side job. In April of 1985, Michael Carroll and his girlfriend Kathleen Allen were the next victims. Michael disappeared, and 2 days later, Kathy got a call at the Safeway she was working at saying that Michael had been shot and she needed to be with him. She told this story to her boss, and when she left the store, she was picked up by a copper-colored Honda Prelude with a white driver. She was taken to the bunker and was imprisoned there for days. She was stripped naked and recorded. She was told that her boyfriend had been killed. Videos survived of her rape and torture by the 2 men. Also, in April of 1985, a family of 3 and their friend had moved into the house next door to Leonard Lake. They did not like Leonard, who they thought was Charles Gunner, who's still, passing that off as his name. He was rude, obnoxious, and he was kind of demented, I guess. Leonard didn't like them because they fired off weapons all the time. Brenda did not like being constantly propositioned by Lake to take photographs. Seriously, get over it, Leonard. You're such a creep. But at one point, Brenda's boyfriend Lonnie had enough of Leonard hitting on his wife. He and his friend Robin took guns and went to confront Leonard. None of them were seen again. Investigators believe that it was Brenda in one of the videos they recovered. In the video, Charles cuts away her clothing with a butterfly knife. He tells her that her, quote, baby is going to be taken away. So she had a 1-year-old at the time. Lonnie Sr. and Robin's bodies were later found on Leonard's property, but the bodies of the infant and Brenda were never found. Courtney?
We can clearly see that neither of these two men had any regard for life or any boundaries around who they were willing to kill. If you remember to last week, this is not the first time that a whole family, including very young children, were killed by this duo.
Yeah, and obviously by now they have found some Project Miranda victims.
Right.
And we don't really go into the rape and torture of them, but basically women were raped and tortured and videotaped, sometimes for days at a time. So that's the end of the murders that we know about. And now we're going to talk more about how they got caught. So it's pretty dumb. And I swear most of the time it seems like these guys get caught because of mistakes that just shouldn't have been made. I mean, not Big Ed Kemper, right? He might have gone on forever if he hadn't turned himself in. But most of the others are just lazy, or their narcissistic immunity has made them feel infallible. Courtney, do you want to say anything about the diagnosis of these two before I continue?
So, for Leonard Lake, I suspect that he would meet criteria for narcissistic personality disorder with malignant and antisocial tendencies, as well as an unhealthy dose of sexual sadism. And for Charles Ng, he seems to have a more classic antisocial personality disorder presentation. But together, the symbiotic relationship that they formed really resulted in both of them ratcheting up the level of depravity and violence to a greater level than I think either would have reached individually.
Do you think that had they not met each other, they still would have eventually started killing people? What's your gut telling you?
I do think so. I think, Leonard had those Project Miranda fantasies. That was very much him. And there's no way that he was going to let those girls go after holding them captive. So I think eventually he would have killed them. And, Charles Ng, he did have a lot of fantasies even before he met Leonard about killing people. So I don't know if that he would have gone into maybe the sexual torture and things like that without meeting Lake, but I think eventually he probably would have killed.
And I think Leonard killed a few people before Charles anyways. His brother, for one, and then his best friend.
Right, exactly.
So, well, like we were saying, Charles was caught because of something stupid he did. And so it was Charles that got them busted. He shoplifted a big old vise from a hardware store. So that's a bulky, pretty big item. And not to mention they're heavy. Leonard was at the hardware store too when this happened, and when they were chasing down Charles, who had fled on foot, Leonard came out and tried to smooth things over. He offered to pay for the vise, that was now in the trunk of the Honda. Police asked for his ID, and of course, his ID wasn't his, so it didn't look like him. So the ID he was now using was of Robin Scott Stapley from the 4 murders he and Ing just committed, with the baby and everything. Robin had been reported missing. They arrested Leonard for the gun with the silencer that they found in his trunk when they were looking through things. When he was taken to the police station, a fingerprint search revealed his true identity, who it was, and he spoke with an officer and told them that he wanted. He spoke with an officer and told them that he was a wanted man and that Charles Ng was his accomplice. He was put into a room and given water and a pen and paper. When a detective later went to speak to him, Leonard was on the floor having some sort of seizure. He had written a suicide note. This is what it said. Dear Lynn, I love you. I forgive you. Freedom is better than all else. Tell Janet I'm sorry. Mom, Patty, and all. I'm sorry for all the trouble. Love, Leonard. So Leonard died shortly after swallowing cyanide pills. And I did some research. Cricket's real name is Carolyn, and she goes by Lynn, so I'm thinking this letter was for her. Courtney, why do you think he gave up Charles? He was going to die. He didn't need to.
Yeah. Well, really, there's no honor among thieves, right? Leonard had no loyalty to anyone but himself, and if he was going down, I think he was going to take Charles with him. I think especially because Charles made such a stupid mistake.
Yeah. He was fuck you.
Right, yeah. And just pointing out as well that we can see that for once Leonard was not lying when he talked about how he always had a dose of cyanide on him in case he ever got arrested.
Yeah, so he was arrested after Charles fled the scene for stealing a vise. They took him in, figured out who he was. took a cyanide tablet, and then like basically just dropped dead. Then he'll be alive for a little longer, but in like a coma before
Right.
he dies. So, yeah, he didn't
They,
lie about that.
they got nothing out of him either
They got
before he
nothing.
died.
Yeah, besides who his accomplice was.
Mm-hmm.
So, I have a feeling though that Charles would have fucked up. Anyways, he's not.
At some point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so now there's a huge mess to sort out. The car's plates were registered to Lonnie Bond, but the VIN of the car was to Paul Cosner, another victim. They found a utility bill in the trunk that led to the property Lake had been living at in the Wilseyville area, and there they found Robin Stapley's and Lonnie Bond's trunk. They also found the dungeon that Leonard had built for his Operation Miranda victims. Inside the bunker/dungeon was a list taped to the walls, and it was called Rules. And I'm going to read those really quick. Number 1, I must always be ready to serve my master. I must be clean, brush, and made up with my cell neat. Number 2, I must never speak unless spoken to. Unless in bed, I must never look my master in the eye, but must keep my eyes downcast. Number 3, I must never show my disrespect, either verbally or silent. I must never cross my arms or legs in front of my body, or clench my fists, and unless eating, must always keep my lips parted. Number 4, I must be obedient completely and in all things. I must obey immediately and without question or comment. Number 5, I must always be quiet when locked in my cell. Number 6, I must remember and obey any additional rules told to me. I must understand that any disobedience, any pain, trouble, or annoyance caused by me to my master will be grounds for punishment. Ugh. Sorry, that was hard. That was hard for me.
It's a lot of rules.
Not as many as the Toy Box Killer had, but yeah.
It's true. But they're just as terrible.
I would be so bad at those because I was just clenching my fists just now, and I'm always crossing my legs and arms in front of me.
Absolutely. I never keep my lips parted.
Yeah, me neither.
Because no one does that.
I mean, unless there's like a dental or orthodontia issue.
Well, yeah,
happening.
but I don't think that's what you meant.
Yeah. So the police had let dogs roam around and they were searching for stuff. And one dog came back and presented what looked like a human bone. And eventually, this is per Wikipedia, the following stuff was discovered. Quote, in a makeshift burial site nearby, police unearthed over 40 pounds of burned and crushed human bone fragments corresponding to a minimum of 11 bodies. A phone line trench 100 feet long and 10 feet deep was found to be filled with trash, personal effects of victims, and 2 intact skeletons. Another intact body was found buried under a chicken coop. 2 bodies found about a mile from the cabin were later identified as Bond and Stapley. They had been gagged and executed by gunshots to the head. So they also found many victim items suggesting that the actual victim count was closer to 25 than 11. They found videotapes. Later, it was discovered that Cricket had removed lots of evidence from the property before the cops could search it. So while all of this was occurring, the cops were still looking for Charles Ng. Well, the dumbass got himself caught while shoplifting again. Ng actually shot the security guard but didn't kill him. In fact, he was able to disarm and detain Charles, the security guard. So this was in Canada. He had got to Canada. And while in Canada for this crime, he was convicted and had to serve 4.5 years. So he had to do that before he could be extradited back to the United States to serve or, go on trial here. And he did not want to come back to the United States because he knew our system of justice included capital punishment in California, especially. So I think Canada must have wanted to get rid of his ass because he petitioned the Canadian Supreme Court to stay in Canada after he was done with his sentence, but they denied him. And a scant 18 minutes after the denial, he was deported back to California. What are your thoughts, Courtney?
I think everything that the police found out at Leonard's property is a good demonstration of his narcissism and false belief of invincibility. I think that he didn't believe that anyone was ever going to find that place and connect it to him after he took the cyanide pill. There was absolutely some arrogance involved to keep identification and items belonging to victims in the same house and on the property where their bodies were also buried. And as for Charles, he displayed the same behavior here as he did when he got caught stealing military weapons in Hawaii. He ran, he camped out in the woods, and then impulsively committed a petty crime and got himself caught.
Do you think he needed whatever he was shoplifting for? I don't even remember what it was. Or do you think, like you said, it was impulse that like made him have to do something?
I don't remember. I know it was like a department store.
Yeah, I don't think it was like food.
Yeah, it may
You
have been
know?
clothing or something perhaps
Yeah.
he needed, but either way.
Yeah. Well, now he's back in California. His accomplice is long dead, and the justice system has waited nearly 5 years for this trial. So, he is indicted on 12 counts of first-degree murder. Ng was a fighter. He tried to sue the state over his stay in the famous Folsom prison, and he filed challenges against 4 judges who were assigned to his case. He filed grievances about his eyeglasses not being the right prescription, how hot or cold his food was, and that he could not do origami in his cell. He would go through 10 lawyers throughout his pretrial process. Some of them were repeat lawyers, and he'd get new counsel again. He filed malpractice suits against a bunch of these attorneys, saying they were incompetent to represent him. After all of this, he decided he needed to represent himself because after all of his attorneys, they were all inadequate. So this caused another year of delays. Eventually, 7 years after he had been extradited from Canada, his trial began. So now it's 1998. By the way, he did not end up representing himself. His lawyer eventually would be a man named William Kelly. Charles' defense was that he was just an observer and all that Leonard and everything that happened was Leonard's fault. Leonard did it all, despite him being on the videotapes. Quote, he further maintained that he was dependent upon Lake for direction, that the abuse he suffered at the hands of his father was a mitigating factor, and that his good behavior behind bars showed that he should be in prison for life rather than executed. So I think like he knows he's going to go to jail for this.
Right.
Sounds more he's just very much worried about the capital punishment. The court psychiatrist testified that Ng had dependent personality disorder, but he also did not watch the tapes where Ng was a more than willing participant. Another psychologist agreed with the psychiatrist who said that Ng was trying to mirror Lake for approval when he participated in the acts. What are your thoughts, Courtney?
So obviously, I have never met or evaluated Charles Ng, so I don't have all the information that the court psychologists had when they diagnosed him with dependent personality disorder, but I have some qualms and questions about it. I do see that Charles was the more submissive partner and might not have committed all of these murders in this way without the encouragement and leadership of Leonard. But it does not seem apparent to me that he was dependent on Lake for everything, like making day-to-day choices.
That's something that's needed for dependent personality disorder.
Yes. Like they can't make decisions about anything.
Got it. Yeah, I don't see that either. I mean,
yeah, because I think we talked about dependent personality disorder with Velma.
Yeah.
Right? Where she she needed to have a partner who was in control, who told her how to live and took care of her. And
right. And
yeah, Leonard wasn't a very caregiving kind of guy.
Besides Leonard, who Charles didn't really know for that long, I don't, at least we didn't read anything about Charles having any other kind of partner at all. No. A romantic partner, a mentor, whatever.
Yeah, he had that one woman from when he was in prison.
Right.
That he had a little fling with, but...
that didn't last long.
No.
Yeah. Well, somehow during the trial, Charles was able to find a juror's phone number and called them at home. His motivation was to cause a mistrial, because he's somewhat clever. Eventually, Charles Ng was convicted of the 11 of the 12 murders. He was found not guilty for the murder of Paul Cosner, regardless of the fact that the pair had driven his car for months. Ng was sentenced to death. When they tried to get life in prison, the judge said this, quote, Mr. Ng was not under any duress. He also said, nor does the evidence support that he was under the domination of Leonard Lake. So obviously the judge didn't believe that diagnosis either, or agree with it. This trial, this huge circus of a trial, cost the state of California $20 million. To put that into perspective, the O.J. Simpson trial was only $9 million. He was convicted of killing the following victims: Sean Dubbs, Deborah Dubbs, Harvey Dubbs, Clifford Parantu, Jeffrey Gerald, Michael Carroll, Kathleen Allen, Lonnie Bond Sr., Lonnie Bond Jr., Robin Stapley, and Brenda O'Connor, all of whom were killed between July 1984 and April 1985. In July of 2022, the California Supreme Court upheld his death sentence. He still has appeals and he can file. He is still on death row. However, no executions in California have happened in almost 20 years. A memorial vault for the victims was erected for the relatives of the murdered. There was an inscription that read, quote, "In Wilseyville we found you, our lost ones. Though taken in darkness, you will forever live in light. Rest in peace. Victims of the 1984-85 Wilseyville mass murder." Courtney, what are your thoughts on how this story ended? And let's discuss a bit on how this duo differs from the Hillside Stranglers.
I mean, like so many of these endings, there's kind of a sense of disappointment at the anticlimax of it all. Mm-hmm. You know, Lake never had to face any consequences for his actions, and Charles wasted a whole lot of resources before having to face his. And you know, when we think about the Hillside Stranglers, Kenneth Bianchi and Angelo Buono, there were some similarities, right? Both had an older, more dominant member and a younger, more impulsive member. Both duos engaged in sexual assault and sadistic behaviors, as well as murder. Both duos were in California, but there were a lot of differences as well. So the Hillside Stranglers, for example, had a specific victim type and murder ritual, where Lake and Ing were more indiscriminate killers. The Stranglers were related, being cousins, while Lake and Ing were not. And after they stopped killing together, Bianchi continued to commit murders on his own. And while there's no evidence that Ing did commit any murders before he was caught, although he was caught fairly quickly after. What else can you think of, Trisha?
Well, Angela Buono and Leonard Lake both were, and I don't know how Leonard Lake was, but they were both sort of like ladies' men. Mm-hmm. They didn't really seem to have a problem getting women. They were aggressive in different ways. Obviously, Leonard Lake asking for nude photos all the time was some people that really turned off, them. And those two also were brought up totally different, right? Kenneth Bianchi was brought up, he was adopted.
Right.
Whereas Angelo Buono, gosh, I'm trying to remember. I think he had a whole bunch of... Oh, Angelo Buono also was like having incestuous relationships with his own daughter, I believe.
That's true. Yes.
I don't know. There's a lot more going on, I think, in the Hillside Strangler case as far as depravity. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but...
Yeah, I think they were more like what you think of when you think of like a serial killer.
Yeah.
They fit that stereotype a little bit more because it was very sexually motivated.
Mm-hmm. Right. They weren't killing people for their
car.
video or their video equipment.
Exactly. Or the hell of it.
Yeah. And I think that Angelo Buono was more of an organized killer because he got rid of a lot of evidence.
Yes.
I think they had to find like a fiber on someone that matched like the fiber inside. It wasn't the way when they found this dude's car. It was all...
Everything was just all out in the open.
Big mess of everything. And, but yeah, it just seems to be that, and maybe we'll see this as we do more duos, that there's going to be most likely an older dominating partner and a younger, more submissive partner.
Right.
I'd be surprised, I think, if it was the other way around where the younger person was the dominating one, but who knows? Because we just haven't done enough, and we'll see. But
right.
I know there's more duos out there. I can't think of any off the top of my head.
Yeah, I can think of some, but they're also mixed gender, so male and female.
Like Bonnie and Clyde. I was thinking of them.
Yeah, or it's the murders. They're British. The Moreland murders.
I don't know that one. Yeah,
that could be wrong. But there's
are those like a couple?
Yeah, they were a couple.
So yeah, we haven't really done a couple yet. So that might be like the next type of duo we should do.
Yeah,
it's like a romantic couple or whatever. But as far as our next case, like I'm not positive. We've got
a couple in the works.
I've got a couple started, but I haven't gotten any like finished yet. So We'll either go way back in time or we'll go back to the 80s.
It'll be a surprise for all of us.
Yeah. So, anyhow, Courtney, what do we do when a middle aged balding man in a gold Honda Prelude asks to take our nude photograph?
Go nuts, go home, and go to therapy.
Yes. Everyone be safe, and we will hopefully see you next Tuesday if I figure out which case we're going to do.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.